Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Mindful Marathon podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I am Dr. Michelle Quirk. I'm a pediatrician and a run coach and the founder of Mindful Marathon, where I help make running easy and fun for busy professionals. And today I have a very special guest with me. I'm very excited to introduce Dr. Erica Bove. She is a double board certified OB-GYN and reproductive endocrinologist at the University of Vermont. And she is also the CEO and founder of Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility. So she is a coach and she empowers women physicians to build their families with confidence, self-compassion, and community. And her mission is to heal and support the healers and to create a legacy she is proud of, which is something we can all get behind. So Dr. Bove, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Quirk.
Yeah, it's great to chat with you. And what brought us together is your love of running and my love of running, and how there
Yes.
are so many parallels between what you do and what I do in our different coaching respects. So tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about your running journey.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you gave such a comprehensive introduction. Thank you so much for that. I am passionate about my clinical work. I'm passionate about my coaching work because I think we need both really to bring about the best outcomes. I will say that, I've been coached a lot throughout my life because I was an athlete as a kid and, sort of there's a whole variety of coaches, right? Like you have coaches who are instill a lot of fear, you have coaches who instill a lot of confidence. And so as I think about my own journey, I somewhere along the line in middle school started playing basketball. And I'm not the most natural athlete, but I have a pretty good work ethic, right? So I remember like doing the monster drills and coming in pretty much near to last and saying, like, I, I know I'm not naturally fast, but like I really want to be kind of at the you know top of the pack. Like I know I can do better than what I'm doing right now. And so as I was going into high school, my best friend, her older brother did cross country running, and she was like, "Why don't you join the running team?" And I was like thinking to myself, like, you just like go and run in the woods, like there's not a ball, like what, And I said, and somebody suggested to me, I don't even remember who, but like, oh, this might make you like faster at basketball. And that was like my life at that point. Like I just love basketball. And so I decided to do it. And they said, okay, by the way, you should really start like running the summer before your first season so you can get in shape and all these things. And I have to say, like, I fell in love with it. Like it's tricky because I know that there are people who like, you know, call themselves like, I'm not a runner, I don't enjoy it, all these things. Like for me, I didn't expect to love it. But the minute I put the shoes on my feet, the minute, and of course, like running in beautiful Vermont is like, who doesn't,
Mhm.
appreciate the gorgeous views and all of that. But it was so interesting. Like, not only did I love running for its own sake in that season, and then I got to basketball and I was like coming in first or second with all these like drills and I had all these endurance. And so there was a lot of like positive reinforcement that it was like something that was worthwhile. And then I mean, I think one thing I really appreciated about it was it also gave me a chance to think. And there wasn't a lot of space in my life for that at that point either. I like had a lot of activities and stuff. So, that was that. The funny story I will tell is my father's an avid golfer and he, sort of said, I think you should do golf like in the spring season. Right. So I was like, okay, sure. So like one time I was in a tournament and then 18 strokes later on one hole, I was like, I'm not sure this is my sport. Maybe next year I'm going to try track and field. And then I ultimately went on to be the state champion in the 3,000-meter run, the
Wow.
race.
Yeah.
And then from there, didn't run competitively in college, but kept it up. And then got into long distance running, like marathons and half marathons. And now I
Yeah.
I do it for fun. It's how I keep up with my friends. I meet friends in different cities and we do races together. Just did my first triathlon last summer. And so it's like part of my regular self-care slash sanity routine to stay running.
Yeah. Yeah. No, a lot of your story resonates. I was not a kid who was a runner, and like I used to look at the track team and the cross country team, and I wanted to be able to enjoy running like that and be, good at it. And I was
Yeah.
not. And I think that for me, it just there was like a barrier of entry there, and I was not going about it the way that was natural for me. And I don't think I was any kind of natural athlete. I was a dancer like through school. So
Yeah.
anyway, I came to it a little bit later, but what kept me going back to it, I think, was the time alone with myself and the time to think. And especially at that time in my life, like residency and afterward, there's just not a lot of space unless you create it for yourself.
That's right. And, I will say, I have a lot of friends now who do Orange Theory Fitness, and I actually love Orange Theory. It gives me a chance to lift some weights and everything. But
Mhm.
I realized recently, I'm like, why do I feel so off? Like, I just did a 14K in the fall and all these things. And I realized it's because I've shifted my exercise regimen to more like in a class, music, coach pretty much yelling at you the whole time. And I unintentionally like cut out some of that more individual outside, long running. And so once I had that awareness, I was like, oh, thank goodness there's a solution to this. So then I just signed up for another half marathon with my good friend in April. And so now I have a plan. But like it is so interesting how it's not just running per se. It's like running, getting into that flow state, getting into the meditative state, thinking about the hard things, noticing nature, like all of that. I mean, I actually think of it as like a spiritual practice, truly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I again, like, I don't think I realized that when I started,
No,
but then over the years and like as, priorities have shifted and goals have shifted, like at the beginning, I felt like I always had to have some kind of race on the calendar to be working toward, and now I don't necessarily need that. Like I can keep up with a base training
that's
without something on the calendar anymore.
That's wonderful. And I my
Yeah.
kids know. I mean, they'll look at me and they're like, "Mom, do you need to go for a run?" Like they just like see the level of stress on my face. And I think not just that, they know how radiant I feel when I get back from a long run. And I mean, long is a subjective term, right? For some people it might mean one thing and some people it might mean another, but like for
Yep.
me when I can go out and think, and even if it's in the rain, like I don't care what the snow, like I don't care what the weather is, but if I can, sort of get that, give that to myself, it feels like I'm radiant. Like and who wouldn't want that, right? It's like the best drug out there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with you completely. And I want to come run with you in Vermont.
Yay, please do. Where are you again? Remind me.
I'm based in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so
Oh yeah.
not that
Yeah.
far. We're in the
Yeah.
Northeast.
That's fantastic.
I've never run a race in Vermont, so that would be something to
Oh, so
put on
there's
the
a,
calendar.
there's a covered bridges half marathon, which
Mm.
that fills up pretty quickly. I will say though, my skeptical view is it wasn't as pretty as I thought it was
Oh,
going to be. It was like a lot of pavement, which is okay, but we could find some really fun, beautiful runs to do together.
that
Yeah.
sounds fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to shift and talk about how running relates to what you do in your coaching. So tell me a little bit about your coaching business, and then we'll tie in the running and see if we can help the listeners out there.
Yeah, gosh, in so many ways. So I became a coach during COVID, and partly because I had access coaching for my own personal reasons, like parenting coaching, relationship coaching. And then I was like, you know what? Like I think I want to be a coach. So I went to coaching school and, sort of learned some of the ways that I could up level my thinking about coaching, my tools. And as I was in coaching school, I was like, oh my goodness, this is what my patients actually need, like to make these big decisions about their fertility. When the doctor's like, do you do inseminations? Do you do IVF? Like all these different sort of points in the sand where people are really trying to decide what to do. I'm like, it's not just the medical questions. It's like, who are you? What are your values? What is your identity? What is your vision for yourself in your ideal world? What is the quality of your relationships? All of this. So I decided to start applying the coaching tools to the fertility world. And I just started like experimenting with my patients, and it was working. Like it was like, people, and thankfully we can bill based on time. So I'd say, like, I know we've talked about the medical stuff. Why don't we have an appointment just to talk about like what you think about motherhood and what really is the right thing for you. And it was going so well that I thought, oh my goodness, like I think maybe in addition to my clinical job, I really need to offer this to people.
Hmm.
So I made some videos of like the sort of the things I thought were most important. I kind of had a sense I might offer it as a course. So I made some homework assignments to go along with that. And then I decided to launch my practice just over a year ago. I most of my clients are female physicians. I think it's just
Hmm.
there's an extra element of being a physician patient, I think. But I also see professional women who are, struggling with the fertility journey. It's usually people who have gone through multiple treatments and it's not working, and people are starting to feel threatened with the possibility of either remaining childless or not growing their families. And so I think that as I am helping people access their own wisdom, their own inner power, I think a lot about how I've been coached as an athlete and how I coach myself as, when you're running, you sort of play little tricks with yourself to kind of tell yourself things to keep going. And so I think about what those things are and how I can help my patients who and my clients who are essentially on a long
Hmm.
marathon of the fertility journey.
Yeah, yeah, oh for sure. I that makes a lot of sense. And I
Yeah.
just anecdotally, I know that yeah, infertility seems fairly common in with physician women especially.
Yeah, it's one in four,
Yeah.
one in four female physicians, one in three female surgeons. But even like in the general population, it's like one in six. And so,
Mhm.
it's interesting because the running, questions surrounding running have really come to the forefront because
Yeah.
a lot of people are told by their practitioners, whether doctors, acupuncturists, whatever else, like don't exercise because it's going to make so many things worse. And I mean, as my doctor role, like people ask me all the time, like, when do I stop running when I'm doing IVF and like what are your guidelines? And it's so hard, even in preparation for our talk today. I went back to PubMed to say, like, okay, what did the data actually show? My clinic has our little like, avoid vigorous activity
Yeah.
when your ovaries are big, don't twist an ovary, don't do yoga, don't do this, don't have sex, like all these things that we tell people. But like, is it actually grounded in science, right?
Mhm.
What I usually tell my patients is like, trust your body. And, if you're not a person who's been very active, right? Say you're listening to this and you're going through the fertility process, then by all means, don't like skyrocket your activity in the middle of a treatment cycle. That's probably not going to be good for your ovaries. But if your baseline level of activity is, is anything more than like nothing, like please maintain that, and it's good for stress, it's good for the body, it's good for physiology. I can always tell when I'm doing an ultrasound on a runner because their pelvic vessels are very prominent, and I really do think it helps. Like, trust your body, listen to your body, because your body's going to tell you if something is not good. Like, I went through the egg retrieval process when I was getting a divorce unexpectedly, and I said, hey, I'm in the perfect demographic, like I should do this. And I sort of experimented with myself. I was like, okay, well, 3 days after my egg retrieval, didn't feel great to go running. So I started walking again, but then
Mhm.
soon my ovaries got back to baseline and it was okay. So that's the biggest thing I think, is to trust your body. And there actually is one study that we found that shows that people who had physical activity right before their IVF cycles actually had higher live birth rates. And I think it's important because so often we see it as a negative, but it actually may be a positive.
Yeah, yeah. And we were chatting beforehand. I have gotten a lot of questions from avid runners who are either told or have read that they should basically like stop their vigorous activity and all of this long distance running, depending on what the situation is with their
Yeah.
IVF cycles. And so I've gotten some questions about that. So I'm glad we're talking about this. And then also just to let people know, like, you don't have to stop completely. Like, and the very basic, even like listening to our bodies when we're sick, right? Like I think a lot of us runners
Yeah.
out there are still trying to figure that out of how to listen to the body and if you have soreness or aches or pains or if you're not feeling well, to not maybe go out that day. So I think going
Yeah.
back to that, like very basic, just checking in with the body is probably the most important thing, no matter where you are in the journey.
100%. I mean, I will say, like, we know that eggs need energy to be able to, reproduce. And so, eggs, the mitochondria, like that's how the chromosomes get sorted, just to geek out for a second. So, like, do you run an ultra marathon in the same cycle that you're doing IVF? Probably not, because, what happens is the body tends to shunt energy to like the brain, the liver, the kidneys, the lungs, the heart, like all the things that are necessary in air quotes. And the ovaries are kind of like not exactly necessary. And they have looked at like body mass index studies. I know that body mass index is kind of like a limited tool, but people who are like at the extremes of like underweight or, frankly, obese, like those people do have worse outcomes. And so, looking at the whole picture, hopefully your REI is looking at that, in the beginning and saying like an REI is basically a fertility doctor for people who don't know that acronym, but just looking at it being like, is your body optimized to be a pregnant person right now? And just understanding that as you're sort of growing eggs, trying to get pregnant, all that thing, like the ovaries do need some energy to be able to work. But, do you go from like running, say 20 miles a week, just to give a number, to nothing? Like, I mean, that just seems ridiculous to me, right? And
Yeah,
if you
yeah,
are regularly cycling, on your own when you're sort of not doing treatments and not on a birth control pill, that's a vital sign. Like that's a good sign that your body sees that you have enough energy around to reproduce. So there's a few different ways to approach it. But I think
yeah.
taking a very holistic perspective and a tailored approach to each person is really the best way.
Yeah, yeah, and all of the things that we're saying, like it just makes perfect sense to me that if this is a usual part of your regimen and this is what keeps you sane and gives you
Yeah.
time and space for yourself, you'd want to put yourself in the most, the the best light possible, right? To have this all work out together in a positive way. So it feels, yeah, crazy to me also to go from 20 miles a week to zero.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I was curious. So, your philosophy, for coaching, I think is very much aligned with my philosophy of coaching as well. Like, not athletic coaching, but fertility coaching.
Mhm.
And one thing I've been experimenting with, myself is like, what's the role of mindful self-compassion? Because growing up as an athlete, it was always like, work harder, look at your lack, where can you shave off these seconds? But like this internal critic just being harsh, harsh, harsh. And, the problem with that is sometimes you actually do get better and faster. And then it sort of starts to create this cycle of thinking that that is the right way to kind of crack the whip and improve.
Yeah.
But as I've been sort of, I kind of have this like sort of in my competitive running phase and then like running quote unquote just for fun and sanity phase, like as I've been an adult. And in the last couple of years, because I've been learning so much about mindful self-compassion through my coaching and my coaching my clients and all that, like I started to try to apply that to myself, right? Because I'm talking to myself in a much gentler, kinder way than I used to. And, the funny thing is, Michelle, like I actually was faster when I took a mindful
Mhm.
self-compassion approach, like keep
Mhm.
going, you're doing great. Like, you're almost like, rather than like, what's wrong with you? You got to speed up. Like, I just noticed my mental chatter. And so, like, I'm curious, like, I know you're the one interviewing me here.
No, it's okay.
Like, can we talk a little bit about like what is a helpful brain tape to have as people are trying to undergo hard things like fertility and running longer distances?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things that has been helpful is to keep, I just call it a training journal, but you can just call it a journal. And just to have awareness of what the thoughts are, because sometimes we're not even aware of the tape that is playing in the first place. So, and I think a lot of us have the negative tape for sure, from wherever that came from, if you were a competitive athlete or not. But it was always like when I started, like you're not very fast, you're not going fast enough, or you didn't hit the paces in this speed workout. There was a lot of like all or none thinking when I trained for the longer distance races. Like if I don't hit these paces, I'm not going to be able to run this marathon. If I don't fit in this long run, I'm not going to get to the finish line of this race. And I think that was I did get to the finish line of the race, but the experience was maybe not the most positive when I started. But
Yeah.
keeping a journal through the years, I can see the evolution of the thoughts and the tape in my own head. And so helping people to figure out like what's the narrative. So keep the journal, figure out what thoughts you're having, and then how do we change them? So I think very small steps, just like the ladder approach. So what are some kinder, gentler ways we can talk to ourselves? And I encourage people to have some mantras, maybe pick, your top three to have for even on your regular easy runs, right? But just to have the narrative play those positive mantras that you can then use on race day or whenever in the future. But it's definitely a process and it takes people time. A lot of us, especially the women physicians, there's a lot of very type A, anxious and a lot of all or none thinking with us. And so
Sure.
we just have to have a lot of kindness with ourselves. And also,
Yes.
like you said, you were doing better, you were getting faster. Sometimes when you realize how to make everything work for you instead of fighting against all of these things, fighting against your schedule, your job, your family, whatever it is. But when you lean in and you just appreciate the process for what it is, sometimes you reap the benefits and you're much more relaxed and can hit the paces because you're fully in the moment and maybe before
Yeah.
you weren't.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the same is true about the fertility journey. And the nice thing is about coaching is like, it's just the access point. So if you're, runners are, learning how to change their negative, their negative tape to maybe something more neutral or even positive, like say they like, drop a glass in the kitchen or something like that, like the automatic response is probably going to be gentler than it might have in the past too. So it
Mhm.
kind of has this way of like filtering into every aspect of life where you're like, oh, like this is not just about running or fertility, but it's actually about, how I see myself, how I treat myself, and who I am at my core, which I think is so cool because it helps so much more of life than just the thing that, it seems like the coaching is about.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's important for everybody to just remember, just science-wise, right? Like we can rewire the brain. And so even, no matter how old you are, how far along in the journey you are, you can still change your thoughts. So if it sounds like, we're crazy, we're both living examples
And
of
it's
the
not
fact that we
even
can
like,
change it.
yeah, it's not even like a dramatic thing. Like sometimes it's just
Yep.
these like 1% shifts,
Yep.
that, and then over time you see the progress. So
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's
Yep.
amazing.
Well, let's see. What didn't we touch on? We wanted to make sure we talked about that study, which is great.
Yeah.
Maybe can you leave us with let us know where we can find you and what work you do so everyone out there can check out
Yes.
your website too.
Yes, absolutely. So I am a fertility physician and a fertility coach. And so I wear two hats. When I am my fertility physician hat, I work at the University of Vermont and I see patients and I do all the IVF and all those things. So if you are in that area, Vermont, Canada, even like Montreal, New Hampshire, New York, see people who come from very far away actually. And I would love to take care of you there. If you've already got your REI, or maybe you live in a more remote part of the country, but you feel that like, your treatments aren't working and you know that there's something better. I love helping people bridge themselves to parenthood in a way that they feel supported, loved, intact. And I have one-on-one coaching. I have support groups every other Friday night. We have an ongoing WhatsApp chat where people share all sorts of things about, inspiring girls. Like, again, like it's not just about fertility. It's about how do we look at our lives in a better way, and together we all get across the finish line to becoming parents. And so it's that's really my passion. It's my coaching practice. It's called Love and Science, Thriving Through Infertility, because I really do believe it takes both. My website is loveandsciencefertility.com. I'm also on socials, LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta, all those things. But my website is really the most comprehensive place. And that's where people, if you heard this and you're, a runner and you also happen to be going through the fertility journey, I wish that weren't the case for you about the fertility, but I do think that there's so much more that we can do with mindset and, really increasing success rates by getting all the vectors in one direction.
Yeah, and thank you for all you do. And I will leave all of your links below here in the show notes so everybody can
Thank you.
find it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast, and thank you everyone for listening. If you haven't left a review yet, please leave a Google review and share this with a friend who you may find that it may help. Okay, and I will see you all on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. If you liked it, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And if you are a newer runner or a runner who hasn't run in a while and you're looking to get back into the sport, you can find out how to work with me over on my website, which is mindful-marathon.com. See you on the next episode.